Hello everyone, today I'm looking at Ace Combat 4, Shattered Skies. So this was kind of an interesting game. I actually really enjoyed this one. It's funny that I played Ace Combat 0 first, since I had never played an Ace Combat game before. This was my first one. I'm like, okay, this is like a prequel kind of thing, and I thought, okay, that's the good way to get into the series, but I really enjoyed it, and people said, you know what, Ace Combat 4 and 5 are actually worth checking out. So playing Ace Combat 4, it's very similar to 0 in a few ways. You know, you have the, shoot down the plane transports, you have the giant mega weapon, you have the enemy surrendering, but they activate the weapon anyway. You have the final mission where you fly through a narrow corridor, take out the final thing. You have the whole buying different jet fighters and adding them to your arsenal of weapons, as well as buying sub-weapons, for those jets, having different kinds of jets in different time frames. The Belkan War was interesting, Ace Combat 0, at least compared to this one, because that took place in the past in the timeline, and so there's a lot more variety of fighters that are a bit more, you could say, archaic, but there's a lot more variety, and there's also a lot more scalability where, by the end of that game, you can have something like an F-22 Raptor that completely outruns everything and feels amazing. So this one, it's a bit more modern-ish. Again, I guess I forgot these games. They're actually sponsored, or at least they have trademark from Lockheed Martin and all the other jet companies when you start up the game. But yeah, this is like their Japan's version of Top Gun, and it's very, how would I say, serious and non-Japanese. Like, you would look at this game and you have no idea that it's actually a Japanese game. You think, oh, this is the normal American whatever Top Gun simulator, but no, this is Japanese take. And I guess the only difference in that aspect of it being a Japanese game is that there's a little bit more focus on story. I found it funny that in Ace Combat 0, they use real-life footage of people for some of the cutscenes, which I find pretty funny. But in Ace Combat 4, all the cutscenes are actually just anime stills. And it's anime stills with a very kind of somber voiceover. And it takes the same kind of approach as the other game, where it's sort of done in a journalist post reflection kind of thing, like, when the war started, this happened, and then that happened. And so there's this whole atmosphere of very self-reflective, introspective, dialogue with sound effects and just these anime stills. And I think it's actually a very good method of telling a story. And what that story really is about this journalist who was basically a kid who grew up by the countryside in his house. And there's two forces, ISAF and Eurasian, or Eurasian. Yeah. Basically, they're fake Europe or something. I'm not really sure. But anyway, so this kid, basically, he grows up in this town. There's a fighter jet that shoots down an enemy fighter jet, and it crash lands in his house and kills his whole family, basically. And all he remembers is that the number on the jet was a yellow 13. And so he ends up being a refugee, going into town, working at a bar to earn his keep, basically, in the aftermath or during the war. And so enemy soldiers come into the bar, and they end up taking refuge in there, and they end up occupying the town. And the soldiers that frequent that specific bar happen to be the Yellow Squad and Yellow 13, who's the guy who shot down the boys, the plane into the boy's house, which killed his family. And so he's planning to kill this guy, but Yellow 13, and they don't give a name. His name is just Yellow 13. He's a very charismatic guy. He plays the guitar, and the kid plays the harmonica, and they actually end up playing music together. And so it's this very contradictory, nuanced kind of narrative, which I find to be really interesting. So yeah, Yellow 13, and you play, the main character you play as is actually Mobius 1. And so you're part of the ISAF forces who end up taking out and fighting the Eurasians. I have to say that it's a very funny contrast to when you have the sort of story components of these very somber, nuanced cutscenes, and then it goes to ISAF headquarters and all of the technology beeps and everything, and the music starts up, and it's a very iconic intro. I would say it's actually, the mission briefing in this game is more iconic than even Ace Combat Zero. It has a certain, the sort of music, the style, the delivery of it, even the voice they use for the commentary. It's kind of almost like a robotic-ish kind of voice. It's very, very distinct, and definitely reminds me of those whole Call of Duty Modern Warfare intros where they have SAS or CIA intros, or United States Marine Corps. They have the symbol, the technology going everywhere. It's very similar to that, but I'd say even more iconic than Ace Combat Zero. And the whole tone of the game, the music, the OST is great. The music is really great, really varied. And I was again taken aback where at the end of Ace Combat Zero, you have this incredibly intense guitar music, like traditional Spanish guitars. And in this game, the final music is this giant orchestral chanting, piece that feels like we're killing God. Like it just comes out of nowhere. So yeah, the music, the presentation, the sound effects are really, really very iconic, very impressive in this game. So Ace Combat 4, the gameplay is pretty simple. You use triangle to select targets, circle to fire missiles, X to fire the gun. The gun in this one actually has limited ammo. Use square to... you select to change to your sub-weapon, which is usually some kind of special weapon, which usually takes a little bit of practice to get used to. Usually unguided bombs or multi-lock on missiles. Use R1 to speed up, L1 to slow down. R2 and L2 control the the yaw of the plane, and so that tilts you. And and you use the D-pad to select the three perspectives, either cockpit, first person mode, or third person mode. So pretty much standard stuff, but you have to remember this game came out in 2001, and so this was the kind of launch of the realistic jet simulator / fighter game. And it's funny to keep in mind that I was thinking that the game itself is very, very simple, in the sense that you just have dots on a screen and you're just taking out those dots with other dots. And if you even look at the radar, that's literally what's going on. You can see your missiles are just little, kind of like blinking dots on a computer screen, similar to early video games like Pong or something. They're very rudimentary. I do get there's this feeling of real immersion and a sense of realism to the whole setting of the game, because the interfaces, the systems are all literally borrowed from Lockheed Martin. So they're trying to, it's kind of like in the way that you could say that Top Gun is a propaganda piece. So is, this game. They want to be accurate, but also interesting with how they tell the story. And so I guess another thing that they do vis-a-vis the story is that during all of the missions, you'll have a bunch of voice lines. So there aren't really any characters that you see per se, but you get a sense from your teammates and other people in your squad in the story just from voice lines during the flying missions, and they have certain personalities. But the main one is Mobius 1 and Yellow 13 that have the main kind of rivalry, basically. And there's one point where they actually do show up in the story, but it's actually so intense or something that you end up retreating after shooting down one plane, and that really affects Yellow 13. You can't really go on. I think it's funny that they're able to have these characters and they just have a color and a number. That's really all you really need in this scenario. But yeah, the gameplay, it's pretty much, once you get the hang of it, it's very, very basic in a way. You go in front of an enemy, you lock on, you fire 2 missiles, you blow up the thing, then you rinse and repeat. Then you slow down, turn all the way, so you can lock on, and then you can just fire 2 missiles and get the enemy. Sometimes you can get them head on if you kind of speed up and you're going directly towards the enemy. And it's actually funny because I had this idea, I don't know if they actually said this, in the game itself, at least in Ace Combat Zero, in the final mission, you're going so fast and you can't really afford to make any mistakes against the enemy that it feels like a joust. So you're basically jousting with the enemy because you're flying straight on at each other, and it's whoever can get the lock on first and shoot their missiles first that will determine who wins that. But you're just flying directly at a target as fast as possible and trying to get off a shot while also dodging their shots. And like I said, you can also do that with normal fighters, but sometimes they'll be smart enough or they won't be going fast enough that they'll actually start turning at the last second, and then you won't be able to get your shot off. But I found that's one strategy that definitely worked, that if you just go full throttle and shoot as fire as you lock on at full speed, you're almost guaranteed to almost get a kill, unless they're in some weird curvature or something. Because at a certain point you can be going so fast that it feels like the enemy is standing still. It's all about speed, acceleration, and trying to get your missiles off to the effect that they're going to just follow the enemy at such a velocity that they just can't escape it. It's very cool and very fun, and the music is great. And I love this game. I guess another thing too is that there's a few missions also focused on ground combat. There'll be missions essentially where you have to take out a bunch of ground targets, and again, there's some certain planes that are better suited for that have like different kinds. There's honestly more variety of ground combat weapons than there are air combat weapons. I mean, there are things like SAMs and multi-lock-ons, but there's also other things where you can like shoot unguided bombs, small, medium, large. There's dispersal bombs. There's also like lock-on ground bombs. And so yeah, I mean, I think if I compared this game to another Jet game, I would say this one has a lot more interesting missions. Like they have one where there's this giant thing that's blowing up the sky, and you have to fly to a certain height limit, essentially. There's naval combat and things like that, and then sometimes it's blowing up the bunker, and so each mission does feel very, I would say, different from the last. They all have a very different style. Usually, I mean, sometimes, at the end of the day, you're just blowing up targets. You're just waiting for it to get in range. And I guess this is the same thing with Ace Combat Zero. The number one cause of death for me was flying into the ground, where you're trying to hit a ground target either with your gun or another lock-on weapon, and you get a little bit too cocky, or you end up going in too fast and just end up crashing to the ground. That is the number one cause of all Ace Combat deaths, I would say. And there are no checkpoints in this game, so you're just started from the very beginning. Even if after you've killed the enemy you end up accidentally crashing, it'll wipe away all your progress, which can be very frustrating, and did happen sometime. Oh yeah, and I forgot, Square was for the radar to enhance it so you can see long range where the enemies are. But yeah, it's very surprising, because between this and Ace Combat Zero, which came out 2006, which is 6 years later, and this was like in the golden age of gaming in the 2000s, there isn't a whole lot of difference between those two games. I would say Ace Combat Zero definitely has more content. I would say it's a little bit more fun. The tone, the style of it is a little bit better. But this feels very close in comparison. I would say Ace Combat 4 feels very, very similar to Ace Combat Zero. Even though they're 5 years apart, they still have the same kind of vibe, the same energy, the same still cool kind of feeling about them, and they're really fun. And again, very abstract. You have these weird, characters' voices. You also have enemy chatter, which is always fun to listen to all the time. It was really frustrating though in the final level, because I was crashing a lot, that you have to re-listen to the exact same audio over and over and over again, and it was just not fun. And yeah, the final mission, it was okay, but it just comprised, doing a bunch of objectives and shooting a bunch of stationary targets, and there wasn't really a final confrontation, which I guess is fine since you shot down Yellow 13 in the previous mission. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about Ace Combat 4. It's a great game. I love Shattered Skies, and that's of course the mid-level. And I hope more people get to experience it. It's actually a very fun game, and I would definitely give it a modern play. Definitely worth it. Anyway, guys, that's all I got to say about this one. I'll see you later. Bye.